Across millennia of theology, the Supreme Lord is described as the absolute, unchecked master of the universe. Yet there is a specific force so potent that it binds the omnipotent. God yields entirely to it. We see this force misunderstood constantly. Look at this crowd. Thousands gather daily, approaching the divine with lists of demands: health, wealth, success. To understand why this transactional approach fails, we can look at the ancient history of King Chitraketu. From the outside, Chitraketu had everything a monarch could want. He ruled a vast, prosperous empire and possessed immense riches. But inside, he harbored a deep, singular obsession. He desperately wanted an heir. He poured his spiritual energy into fulfilling this material craving. Eventually, his conditional devotion appeared to pay off. By the grace of visiting sages, a son was finally born to him. But treating devotion as a vending machine to extract worldly favors carries a heavy risk. It leaves us completely exposed to the illusion that we can control the universe. Chitraketu's sense of control evaporated instantly. The other queens, consumed by fierce jealousy over the new prince, secretly slipped poison into the infant's milk, killing him in his crib. The king was destroyed by grief. But the sages who had originally granted the son returned, using their mystic power to temporarily draw the child's soul back into its lifeless body. As Chitraketu wept over him, the soul looked up and asked a single piercing question. "Which of my millions of past life fathers are you crying for?" That single sentence broke the king's reality. In a flash of brutal clarity, he saw that human attachments, even the strongest biological bonds, are temporary roles played out across countless lifetimes. When we obsess over the things we lack, we chain ourselves to a cycle of suffering. We anchor our happiness to illusions that can vanish in a second. Chitraketu didn't return to ruling. He walked away from his empire, his wealth, and his queens, dedicating his life entirely to understanding the absolute truth. He began the practice of sadhana bhakti. This is a preparatory stage of devotion. It requires actively training the mind to cut through worldly distractions and focus exclusively on God. Vedic scriptures describe this mental state using the geography of the Ganges River. Just as the water cuts a continuous path through a rocky valley to the sea, our thoughts must flow steadily toward the divine. The philosopher Adi Shankaracharya explained this using a physical analogy. He compared the mind to a soft potato. If you drive sharp, rigid needles into it, they lodge firmly in place. In this practice, those needles are godly thoughts, embedded so deeply into the mind that they become permanently stuck. True spiritual progress doesn't happen passively. It requires forcefully wresting your mental energy away from daily anxieties and locking it directly onto the divine. Chitraketu perfected this focus. He elevated himself to the status of a celestial being, traveling through the skies high above the domain of the gods, eventually reaching the snow-covered peaks of Mount Kailash. There, he saw Lord Shiva sitting openly with Mother Parvati seated on his lap. Seeing the great ascetic in such an intimate, casual pose, Chitraketu laughed out of pure innocent amusement. But Parvati took deep offense. Outraged on her husband's behalf, she unleashed a devastating curse, condemning Chitraketu to lose his celestial form and be reborn as a bloodthirsty demon. A normal person would have panicked. We would plead and argue or collapse into despair, losing lifetimes of spiritual progress. Chitraketu simply stepped down from his celestial vehicle, bowed his head flat against the ground, and accepted the horrifying curse with a calm smile. He held zero resentment, because a true master recognizes that heaven, hell, blessings, and curses are all equal illusions. When the mind is perfectly anchored, external circumstances cannot disturb it. Watching this, Lord Shiva turned to Parvati and stopped her. He explained that Chitraketu possessed Nishkam Bhakti, pure, completely selfless devotion without a single personal desire. This is where the power dynamic of the universe reverses. When love becomes entirely devoid of selfish requests, it becomes the one force capable of binding the Creator. The scriptures state this explicitly. Lord Krishna declares that he actually walks behind his selfless devotees. He does this, he says, so that the dust rising from their feet might fall upon him and purify him. We have historical records of this exact dynamic in action. In 14th century Eastern India, there lived a poet saint named Vidyapati, whose love for God was entirely unconditional. His devotion was so pure that Lord Shiva physically manifested on earth, disguising himself as a lowly servant named Ugna, performing menial chores just to remain near Vidyapati. Ultimate spiritual liberation does not come from bargaining with the divine to manipulate your daily life. It comes from cultivating a love so completely selfless that it captures the master of the universe.